Hello everyone, I'm very glad that you listened to my story. Please give me a follow and like the video if you enjoyed it. Feel free to comment and provide feedback so I can improve the sound quality. Yes, I will now continue the unfinished story. Chapter 63, Announcing His Awakening. Chapter 63, Announcing His Awakening. After a while, Felix broke out of the enchantment and took a deep breath with his eyes closed shut, not daring to see her bewitching face anymore. He knew that he screwed up big time after seeing her for just a few seconds as in before. He only heard her voice while imagining her as an old hag, but now that he saw her real form, he would find it extremely difficult to listen to her properly without recalling her angelic beauty. Heck, even if she cursed at him, it would only sound like heavenly bells ringing in his ears. That's why he knew that he was done for after all. If he couldn't fix this enchantment, the fate of being her simp wasn't too far of a stretch. At that point, he would truly become her slave, a yes man who would never refuse any of her requests. No wonder she said that he wasn't going to handle seeing her naked before. What a joke. Currently he couldn't even keep eye contact with her face without breathing like a horny teenager, don't even mention seeing her nude. No doubt, Felix would straight away pass out from the arousing sight. As he kept taking deep breaths periodically, his enlarged slit slowly returned to their original size. He placed a hand on his heart that was beating 100 times per minute, trying to calm it a bit. Get a grip. She is as old as the universe, don't be fooled by her captivating face. In the end, she is still an old lady. He tried to relax his teenage hormones that were causing his body to have such an intense reaction, by mentioning the large age gap between them. However, his plan quickly fell apart as he heard her talking in her sleep with a charming voice. You stingy bastard, you dare refuse to bring me movies to watch, burn in hell. Even though she was cursing him, Felix only had a love-struck expression on his face while hearing her talking about him. Just like a crush finally responding to your message after 6 months of waiting. What he feared would happen, ended up happening eventually, so, without further delay, he quickly escaped from his consciousness without fulfilling his plan of scaring Isna. In the White Room, Felix woke up with black lines on his forehead. Fuck, she was probably planning to take advantage of my age, by harassing and teasing me when I visit her for the first time. Good thing he saw her while sleeping without her knowledge, so now, the situation could still be salvaged if he slowly managed to numb her beauty from his memory by seeing her constantly, or imagining her all the time. This way, when he finally sees her for real, the only response he would give was, meh, not bad. But that wasn't going to be a walk in the park, since she could read his mind and easily figure out his plan. So he had only a limited duration to take advantage of, and that was during her sleep. I will never give her the satisfaction of seeing my stunned expression when I meet her next time. He stood up with his fist clutched tight and said, I swear on it. He then dropped the matter for now, as his time inside the room was tight, so he began scrolling for other necessary techniques to buy, such as the UVR consciousness connection, that would allow him to connect to the UVR wherever he was in the universe without relying on signal towers like commoners. The consciousness access technique he was using now only allowed him to enter his consciousness, nothing more, nothing less. After buying a couple of different techniques, he closed off the screen and left the White Room without testing them. A few hours later, Felix already returned to his room in reality and paid a servant to handle the delivery process of the gifts. It was really a weird moment when Felix welcomed the servant, wearing wide glasses that covered half his face, a cap on his head, and a hoodie on top. His appearance resembled a celebrity trying their best to remain undercover in public. However, Felix wore like that just to cover up for his mutations, so the news wouldn't leak outside this early. The last thing he needed was handling the Elder's investigation right now, as a more pressing issue was chasing after him, which was how to deal with Isna's overpowered charm without alerting her. He spent hours thinking of a solid plan, but, no matter what he came up with, he always returned to his original first plan, that was to numb his emotions by seeing her constantly in her sleep. He knew that a plan like this wasn't reliable much, but when compared to what he came up with, it was the only one that had the highest chance of success. After all, everything in the universe would gradually lose its beauty and luster if one kept staring at it constantly for a long period of time, or at least, the feeling wasn't going to be the same as seeing it for the very first time. The only fault in this plan was the fact Asna could wake up at any given moment without prior notice. Felix had no plans to meet up with her while awake, otherwise, the fate of getting harassed and teased to death was inescapable. Hence, the current dilemma, whether to go for this plan or not. Fuck it, I will enter as much as possible during this month to build immunity against her. He massaged his temples gently and added, if she wakes up, so be it. I will take her teasing like a horny teenager, nothing to be ashamed of since I am excused from anything I do or say during my hormonal upsurge. This is all the fault of my body, not me. He quickly built a solid excuse to use in case the plan failed. After all, his body was still 18 years old, the year where hormones were doing most of the talking and not his rationality. Felix sighed one last time and pinched his throat again, planning to access his unconsciousness to kickstart his plan as fast as possible. There was no time to waste, as every second counted in this race. Either he survives her charm, or she wakes up and finds out about everything. 20 days quickly passed by, as the big day of awakening in the family was happening tomorrow morning. Everyone was on edge, whether parents or the few remaining juniors who were about to awaken. No one was spared from the tense atmosphere. The entire building had descended into a deafening silence, in preparation for tomorrow's big event. Yet suddenly the silence was broken by Felix's loud bragging voice that resonated on every floor. Party in my room to celebrate this daddy successful awakening. Only female cousins are invited though. Thank you and good luck tomorrow. After finishing his announcement, Felix paid the monitor room guard 2 cigarettes and bolted in the direction of his room. He knew that the elders were going to rush towards it, to see if he lied or not. Thus, it was better if he was there already than to be cornered by them in the hallway. Just like he guessed, the moment the announcement was made, everyone's peaceful expressions changed to disbelief and shock. Especially the juniors, who were relaxing their mentality in preparation, as they heard his damned voice, loud and clear from the speaker that was installed in their room. Bullshit, how can he awaken when his bloodline is in the hands of the elders? Kenny, that was practicing yoga in his room, sneered after hearing Felix's bold claim. His reaction was exactly the same as the rest of the juniors. They honestly believed that Felix was either lying as a prank or to lighten the mood. Whatever it was, his claim was totally bullshit. After all, the elders were definitely not going to give him the bloodline bottle during this sensitive moment. It wasn't just him, but every junior had their bloodlines taken by the elders 10 days prior, after a moronic junior tried to awaken secretly after realizing that he couldn't handle the torture of the mock practice anymore. His thoughts were understandable, as he believed that he would rather go for it and wish for Lady Luck to grace him than to have his bloodline bottle taken away after giving up the practice. Unfortunately, his shriveled body was found the next morning laying on a pool of clotted blood. Thus, the juniors had no plans to head to Felix's room and entertain his crap. They would rather continue their mental preparation, hoping to get a peace of mind for the big day tomorrow. On the other hand, Olivia was the total opposite, as she quickly left her room with a worried expression. I hope this is not one of his stupid pranks, or else he will be heavily punished by the elders. She chewed on her lip inside the elevator and murmured, "Stupid Felix, it is really bad timing for pranks." Noah's ears twitched slightly, then returned normal. That was the only reaction he had about this situation. Meanwhile, on the roof, near the swimming pool and the garden, wide-eyed, Robert spat a mouthful of orange juice at Albert's face. Did that rascal really awaken? He wiped his mouth and said, I know for a fact that he won't lie about those kinds of things, which means he bought another bloodline from the UVR and used it. Dumbfounded, Albert cleaned his face from the juice drops. He did not even lash at Robert after being showered like that. He simply responded with a questing tone, but why didn't he wait until tomorrow? Isn't much better to awaken under our supervision? What's more pressing is to find out which bloodline he integrated with, and why did he do so without informing us? Abraham slammed his palm on the table and shouted, "This is intolerable action that must be punished, otherwise, everyone would start copying him and doing what the hell they want without our approval." He huffed, "We can't be having any more dead bodies on the building. Enough wasting time asking us." Charlotte pushed glasses upward her nose bridge and said, "Let's go find out in person. I trust Felix will have a plausible explanation." After Felix reached his room, he kept the door wide open and sat on a chair in front of it with a relaxed smile. He felt quite relaxed about the entire situation, as he spent the past half-month preparing enough material to counterattack every question they throw at him. A few moments later, the first to arrive was unsurprisingly Olivia, who peeked inside the room with one eye while leaning against the wall. Immediately after spotting Felix, who was sitting in the middle of the room in a carefree manner, she yelled out loud while baring her small fangs at him, "Who are you? And what did you do to Felix?" Chapter 64, Heart Attack. Chapter 64, Heart Attack. Felix didn't know whether to laugh or cry at her reaction, but he could not blame her after all. His entire demeanor had transformed after his stylish mutations occurred. If before he appeared harmless and playful to everyone else, now with his current appearance, his bearing completely changed to being cold and dangerous with those gleaming deadly slits. But that's only if he kept his mouth shut. Too bad, Felix was not known for being as such, and he wouldn't change his personality just to fit his current style more. So, he welcomed the fuming Olivia with his typical charming easygoing smile. "Come inside, little Oli, don't worry, it's just me, Felix." Olivia stuttered while pointing her shaky finger in his direction. "What happens to your hair and eyes?" Before Felix could even answer back, she fired another question with a hint of excitement in her voice. "Did you really awaken? And those are the famous mutations that I read about online?" "Indeed, those are the byproducts after awakening," he answered, smiling. She quickly rushed to his side and asked with stars in her eyes, "Can I touch your hair, please? It looks so soft and smooth." Felix rubbed his nose and allowed her to do as she pleased, yet he instantly regretted his decision after she planted her face on his hair and started rubbing it with her eyes closed shut in content. "So soft and silky, this is the dream hair of every girl." "Enough, Oli, get your face away." He pushed her clingy head away and scolded, "You are dirtying it with your dripping saliva. Fuck, my purple tips are all stained." "Stop being stingy, just let me smell it one more time." Olivia just kept evading his hands while sniffing his hair with a happy expression like a puppy. Who could blame her though? Felix's hair had a unique natural fragrance that could be sold as perfume worldwide and reach instant success. The mutation might be useless in fights, but it made sure he wouldn't lose out in terms of looks and attractiveness to anyone. "God damn it, Olivia, don't force me to cut eye." Suddenly both of them froze, playing around as their eyes made contact with five elders who were watching them with a wide grin. "Olivia, who are you flirting with?" Charlotte asked. "Sigh, our little flower is even flirting with men now. Time truly flies." Carter's shoulders slumped a bit. "For my grandson to have his girlfriend flirting with another man even in his room," Robert sighed, "I truly raised disappointment. If he saw her now, his hair will probably turn green, don't you think?" Albert threw a jab at Felix without mercy. "True. I know for a fact mine would." Abraham nodded his head while touching his long white hair. Irritated, Felix stared at those old fogies tease him with a dark expression. He knew that the elders were taking advantage of the situation to vent some of their anger at him, after not being informed that he was awakening. If before, they were a bit skeptical at his announcement, now, after seeing his hair and eyes, it became pretty clear that he was telling the truth, which made it pretty hard for them to stomach. After all, too many things could go wrong during the process of awakening, and only by having someone at Felix's side, backing him up whenever an issue popped up, could he awaken safely. Just like when Asna intervened when he was about to pass out. But the elders had no idea that he had her at his side. They thought that he went full commando, like an idiot, and risked his life for no apparent reason. "Elders, it's not what it looks like." This is Felix. After he awakened, Olivia jumped away from Felix like someone stepped on her tail. She tucked her hair behind her ears with a slight blush on her cheeks and murmured, "And he is not my boyfriend." Felix immediately supported her claim with a nod and changed the subject to not embarrass her any further. "What brought you here, Grandpa? Are you here for the party?" he asked. "Rascal, stop playing dumb, hurry up and explain yourself. I can only hold those fogies from beating you up this far." Robert held his hand behind his back and ordered him to cough up his excuse. "You better provide a good reason, otherwise, even I won't be able to save you from the punishment." "He is right, don't try to bullshit your way out of this." Abraham approached him and said, "Just tell the truth, at least your punishment will be light." "Queen AI, please show them my betting log." Felix kick-started his plan immediately without using words, but actually showing them hard evidence first, to facilitate the following lies. "As you wish, Sir Felix." Right away, Queen presented for each elder a holographic log that showcased Felix's latest bet. The elders were not expecting this at all, as they assumed that Felix would either lie through his teeth or acknowledge his wrongdoing. But they still read the log with narrowed eyes, trying to see what he was on about. Yet, the moment they spotted the huge amount that he won after betting on Wally, their eyes couldn't help but widen in disbelief. You actually managed to win 1 million from betting." Abraham shouted out loud, almost deafening the elders near him. However, they didn't seem to mind, as their eyes were too engrossed in reading that amount over and over again. Their expression was slowly changing from disbelief to envy and finally greed. The only one who didn't show those desires was Robert, who kept chuckling foolishly like he lucked out on a lottery. Felix merely sighed after noticing their human-like behavior, as he understood that the entire family budget did not surpass 5 million SC even after having the AP bracelet, and being in contact with UVR for over 8 months. That 5 million was the fruit of their investments in the UVR in the past 8 months. When compared to Felix, who earned 80 million in 2 days due to his memories, it truly appeared pitiful, but this was the true reality of earning money in UVR. It was never an easy endeavor to do so, since to sell within the markets, having a good reputation, was a must, but to obtain a good reputation they needed to sell first. Such a vicious circle was the reason why the majority of new businessmen, who were trying to make a living, tuck their tails between their legs and cancel all of their business ventures. As for investments, that rarely worked well in the UVR, where scammers were popping out like mushrooms with new projects to fool the investors every goddamn second. Only veteran investors were able to spot the small pieces of gold in the sea of dung those scammers created. One should never take Felix's ways of earning money as a standard. After all, he was really just cheating his way up by taking advantage of his memories. If he didn't have them, he would have definitely performed even worse than the family. Indeed, it was truly just blind luck. Due to my curiosity, he scratched his nose and asked, "Do you want to hear the long version of the process or the short one? Please share all the details on how you did so." Abraham sat on the couch near him and said with his arms crossed, "This is extremely important to the family future." "As you wish." With a confident smile on his face, Felix started sharing the bullshit story he worked hard to create. "Well, as I mentioned before, I only gambled because of my curiosity, but before I did so, I needed the capital first, since I was penniless the moment I was dropped in the UVR. "Indeed, just like us," the elders nodded their heads. "So I tried to find ways to earn coins as fast as possible. Thus, I did what anyone in my age would do." He shrugged his shoulders. "I searched online for a solution, and just like always, the UVR network did not disappoint, as I have read in a public forum, that there is a law, entailing that any newcomer in SGA gets a 100,000 SG loan with low interest and without providing a valid reason. Here I was wondering how you managed to get capital. It turned out you used the free loan rule." Disheartened, Abraham sighed after realizing that Felix did not luck out a job in a well-paying business or a shop like he assumed, but merely used his SGA rights, which they already had knowledge of. His disappointment was understandable, as the family currently wanted nothing more but to expand as far as they could in the UVR. Thus, if Felix had actually found a job, it would further enhance their garbage social network even further by obtaining the friendship of his boss. I can already see the rest of the events. You bet your entire capital on the currently famous solid wall, thus managing to hit it big. Indeed, my father's senses tingled that there is a profit to make in this gamble, so without hesitation, I threw everything I had on Wally. He looked at Abraham right in his eyes and said, I wanted to inform you about taking this gamble with me, but I know that it will be really hard for you guys to bet the family future on a single cent that might turn wrong. The elders' silence after hearing his explanation was a clear sign of agreement. In fact, they felt like if he told them, they would do everything in their power to convince him to either not bet or cancel it. Elders' caution attitude towards life was not the same as youngsters, who never gave a crap about future repercussions. It was a correct move not to inform us about this one. Robert scratched his beard and asked, but why didn't you tell us that you planned to awake yesterday with a different bloodline? Indeed, if you told us, we would have done our best to assist you. Charlotte nodded. Felix truly felt like a criminal being surrendered by detectives. Nonetheless, he neither broke off the character nor showed any loophole in his story. Well, I could not share all of the details, since I am bound by a contract I signed, but I can tell you one thing. He stared at their penetrating eyes, that were scanning every twitch in his face, just like a lie detector, and said, the bloodline I awakened with, was a legendary rank. The instant he said the rank of the bloodline, everyone's brain short-circuited. The bombshell he dropped was too much for their mind to handle. They simply couldn't process how could someone in their family obtain a legendary bloodline, while they weren't able to even buy an epic rank one. This unbelievable fact truly blew their minds away, and their deluded stiff eyes were the best proof of so. Elders, are you all right? With a hidden glint in his eyes, Felix asked worriedly. However, the only response he received was Robert's body dropping on the ground with a hand clutching his chest in anguish. Speechless, Felix stared at his grandfather having a heart attack at this untimely moment. The shock was truly too big for Robert's fragile heart to handle. Good thing, he didn't expose that he actually earned a whopping 80 million from the bet, otherwise, his grandfather would straightway drop dead. Chapter 65, Longevity Potion Effect. Chapter 65, Longevity Potion Effect. Everyone in the room broke out of their daze after hearing Robert's forehead smack into the floor carpet. Thud. Fuck. Robert, don't you dare die on me now. Albert quickly rushed to Robert's side and knelt next to him, preparing to provide chest compression or CPR if his heart stopped beating. As for now, Robert appeared to be only having symptoms of a heart attack, since he kept clutching his chest with a twisted expression. It seemed like the squeezing pain in the center of his chest made it difficult for him to breathe. If this carried on, his death wouldn't be a far-fetched ending. Abraham quickly took his phone out and called for the medical team in the building, who was responsible for the medical health of the juniors, to rush here ASAP. Meanwhile, Olivia kept running all over the room like a headless chicken, having no clue what she was supposed to do. Helpless, Felix sighed and took the longevity potion from his spatial card, planning to feed it to his grandfather. He never wanted things to go this way, as he preferred to hand it when he was alone with his grandfather, to avoid more unnecessary questions. If he explained to his grandfather how he bought it, he could leave taking care of the elders to him, but now, he could only use it in front of the elders, who would definitely skin him alive after hearing its price tag. Well, change of plans, I guess. Unlike the rest, who were losing their shit, Felix approached his grandfather and sat near his head. He then forcefully opened Robert's mouth and emptied all the white content of the potion inside, not giving the elders a chance to stop him. What the hell are you doing, Felix? Have you lost your mind? Livid, Carter jumped on Felix and dragged him away from Robert, who lay on the floor unmoving like a corpse after drinking that potion. No one could blame him, though, as it was a too foolish move to feed a person who has a heart attack with an unknown substance. It could only make his condition worse and even straight away kill him. Just like the current case, Robert's heart completely stopped beating, scaring the shit out of everyone. Immediately, Albert started doing CPR and chest compression in between each pause. No one bothered with Felix anymore or scolded him. They watched Albert trying his best to revive Robert while holding their breath nervously. Nonchalant at being seized underneath Carter like a criminal, Felix coughed to get their attention and said, "Elder, you can stop. You won't be able to revive him," he quickly explained after seeing their murderous gazes. "I fed him a longevity potion. It will remove all of his diseases at once and also provide him with immunity to them for the next 300 years that he will live. He will wake up automatically after the reconstruction process is over. Don't waste your breath," he said, chuckling. Albert's folded hands instantly froze mid-air after hearing the name of the dream potion he always wanted but never had the capital to get it. It wasn't just him who acted like this, but every elder in the room froze as well, even the youngest of them all, Charlotte. After all, the entire reason they were using coins they earned not on themselves but their juniors was but an investment for the future. A future where one of their children made it big and gifted them a longevity potion that cost almost 1 million SC. However, not in their wildest dreams would they have thought that Robert would drink one in front of them this early without even being aware of it. Albert stared at Robert's peaceful face and wanted nothing more than to slap him hard in the face for having such a grandson that spent his entire fortune on him. Meanwhile, his granddaughter didn't even give him a call once a month. Such filial pity was almost extinct in the current age. The silence did not last long, as it was quickly broken by Felix's whining, "Elder Carter, can you get up already? My hair is being dirted from lying on the floor. It takes a lot of effort each day to wash it." "Who gives a shit about your hair?" Abraham roared with a booming voice. "You better confess how much SC you own." "Felix, it is clearly impossible to obtain both the legendary bloodline and also the longevity potion with only 1 million SC, no matter how much you think about it," Charlotte said, composed as always. "I was planning to explain everything at once in detail, but Grandpa just had to steal the spotlight and act dead." "It's not my fault," he said. "All right, let's wait for Robert to wake up, then you can share everything." She returned to her seat and put one leg above the other, waiting for Robert to wake up from the reconstruction process. The rest followed after her and receded as well. Only Carter stayed in his position, uncaring about Felix's cries. "Elder, I think it's better to cancel the medical call," Olivia suggested softly. "Oh, thank you for reminding me, little Oli." Abraham patted Olivia, who was sitting next to him, and quickly cancelled the medical call. It was much better to have as few outsiders as possible when dealing with such sensitive matters. Fortunately, Robert did not keep them waiting for long, as he woke up a bit muddled a couple of minutes later. "Why do I feel like I am back to my 20s? He murmured while touching his heart with a frown. He then applied force on his neck but felt nothing, followed by his lower back, but still felt nothing. He kept applying pressure on all of the body parts used to torture him due to his old age, yet he only felt comfort each time, making his face light up brighter and brighter after each attempt. Relieved and quite happy, Felix stared at his grandfather, who was touching himself up like a kid. "Worth it," he murmured. That's the only thing he could say to express his joy after seeing one of his previous regrets get finally resolved. However, his joy was quickly replaced by shame after seeing his grandfather putting his hand in his nether region with clear expectations written on his face. Shortly after, Robert stood up with his hands in the air, shouting out loud like a deranged madman, "My dragon has revived after 30 years of dormant." Felix just buried his head in the ground, trying his best not to associate himself with his grandfather after seeing such shameful behavior. Meanwhile, the elderly men all gave Robert a dirty look with a hint of envy. As for Charlotte and Olivia, one just stared calmly, unbothered about the farce, and the other covered her eyes with her fingers while peeking from the gaps with a flushed face. "Enough embarrassing your grandson, old geezer." Albert smacked Robert's bald head to vent some of his envy and said, "You are making him regret gifting you the longevity potion." Robert did not even lash out at Albert. He stared at Felix in bewilderment after realizing that his body rebirth was due to the longevity potion and not some miracle he assumed in his mind. Yet, the first thing that came out of his mouth was not gratitude but scolding. You little bastard, why did you waste $1 million on these old bones? He added in anguish, you could have bought resources to help you reach a higher level than your peers, or at least invest that capital in business within the UVR. So many things could have been done with it. If he weren't bald, he would have pulled his hair out in frustration. I can always earn those later some way or another. Felix shook his head and smiled, but you only have one life, and I would be a fool if I didn't use what I earned to cure your disease and add some extra years. He chided, with your drinking habit, you might flat out die tomorrow. I can't risk it. Everyone had their tongue tied after hearing his claim. After all, to be selfless to your own kin was a virtue worthy of respect by anyone. Robert could only grin foolishly while poking Albert in his temples. How do you find my grandson? Not bad, right? He placed his arm around Albert's shoulder and continued bragging with a smirk. You always mock me, saying that I wasted too many assets on a good-for-nothing kid. He, who's laughing now? Irritated, Albert could only lower his head and accept his taunting in silence. He knew that nothing he said would be good enough as a retort, since Robert was completely right. He indeed mocked and threw some insults at Robert each time he saw him trading his assets to negate young Felix's punishments. For a cheapskate person like him to see that happening in front of him, he honestly could not resist mocking Robert for it. But now the tables had turned. The wastrel he was mocking helped his grandfather add 300 years to his longevity, while his granddaughter wasn't even interested in this awakening crap after he taught her laboriously in her young age to only live for money and money. All right, enough bragging, Robert. We still have unfinished business with Felix. Abraham quickly saved Albert by mentioning the ongoing questioning. All right, I will visit this old coot later in his room to continue our delightful conversation. Robert smiled in Felix's direction and said, Felix, get it over with, and tell them what they want to hear. Carter understood the cue and helped the irritated Felix to stand up. Elder, you really need to lose some weight. Pained, Felix massaged his back and returned to his seat, planning to continue his bullshit from where he left. As I said before, I am bound by a contract I made when I obtained the legendary bloodline, hence I can't explain the details of the bloodline. He dusted his hair gently while uttering, but I can tell you how I obtained it. Good, that's what we want to hear in the first place, Abraham said. Well, after winning the $1 million SC, I thought it was my lucky day, so I decided to participate in some market lotteries. He smiled. I joined each one I could find until the number of tickets I purchased raised to 150 with a total of 150,000 SC. So you are telling us you wasted 150,000 SC in lotteries? Abraham mumbled under his breath in disbelief, not daring to entertain the thought that Felix just wasted that much in ***ing lottery. Who could blame him, though? 150,000 SC was 30% of the entire training camp budget. I am gonna kill you, little bastard. He immediately dashed towards Felix with bloodshot eyes, trying to rip him apart. Fortunately, everyone held him back before he committed a crime. Felix stopped trying to build suspense and instantly said everything at once. After seeing the enraged elder, he honestly could not afford to play with their emotions anymore. I lost every lottery ticket, except the bloodline one, which I managed to win the big prize of the month, and it was a legendary tier 1 beast, he added swiftly to ease Abraham's fury. In other words, I spent 150,000 SC to obtain a legendary bloodline that could only be bought in auctions with outrageous prices. He is right, he truly obtained it as a bargain. Charlotte nodded her head and asked, I guess you used the remaining coins to buy the longevity potion, right? Felix only nodded in agreement, as this was much better than he planned to bullshit with. Abraham relaxed a bit after understanding the full picture, but still, he didn't let go of Felix yet. But why did you awaken without informing us? He questioned him while being shoulder-locked by Albert and Robert. I doubt the contract will enforce you with such a stupid condition. Do you think I am retarded enough to inform you guys that I plan to awake with a legendary bloodline? He sneered, uncaring about saving them face. I know for a fact that you will pressure me to hand it over so you can resell it and obtain enough coins to invest in business opportunities within the UVR. So, to avoid the entire situation, I would rather just risk awakening solo than informing you. He shrugged his shoulders with hands spread apart. Don't take it personally, I am simply protecting my own benefits. Tongue-tied at his reason, the elders were left without any way to retort his negative assumption of them, as everything he mentioned was 100% correct. They knew that when it came to the family's future, personal feelings could be overlooked. Thus, they were going to force Felix to hand the bloodline one way or another. Such a treasure that could be sold for hundreds of millions must not be used on one person. Too many things could have been solved by having that amount in their bank account. First, it was enough to stomp all the families and authority figures on Earth, leaving them to bite their dust. Second, it could be used to buy better bloodline and resources for their juniors. Most importantly, they could buy longevity potion for each of them without feeling a dent in their capital. This was what their thoughts were, and they were not ashamed of them because everything they do was for the family, except the potion one, that was simply a universal wish for everyone. But Felix was right, there was nothing personal here. He had no reason to hand over his own benefits for the family, a place where he had only but bad memories. So, they didn't blame him either, hate him, they just sighed in helplessness over missing such a large opportunity to make a difference. All right, there is no need to say more, lad. You did what you thought was right, and no one will scold you for it. Albert walked towards the door and warned sternly, but you better work your ass off to bring its potential to the limit. Suppose you can't even secure a representation spot with this bloodline, I will beat you to death. The rest gave Felix a warning look and hastily chased after Albert, planning to see how they could take advantage of Felix's awakening to help the other juniors. They obtained the answers they came for, so there was no point remaining in the room anymore. Although those answers did not please them much, they still felt a little better after knowing that a Felix had awakened, and also with a legendary bloodline. At least, they must be the first family on Earth to have a legendary bloodliner. Robert hugged Felix with a warm smile. I am proud of you, kid. Your decision was the best one to be made, since only by securing your future can you start thinking of others. Thanks, Grandpa, I will keep your words at bay. Felix returned his hug while making an inviting motion to Olivia with a hidden glint. She shyly approached them and entered the hug as well with a cute smile. Sadly, that smile was replaced with disgust after hearing two loud farts coming out of Felix and his grandfather. She quickly tried to remove herself from the hug, but would the shameless duo be that generous and let her leave without taking a whiff? Sadly, it was a hard no. So, poor Olivia could only remain within their clutches with watery eyes and constipated expression from the deadly smell. Sauve me, elders. Too bad. Their devilish laugh quickly engulfed her cry of help after using their unique trapping technique to prank her successfully. If Robert wasn't in a good mood, he wouldn't have entertained Felix's hidden wink he gave him during the hug. Chapter 66, The Integration Process. Chapter 66, The Integration Process. 3 days quickly passed by, as the big day of awakening ended up on a successful note without any hiccups. 8 juniors managed to awaken successfully after surviving the excruciating agony of the process. Some were known to have higher chances to awaken, like Noah, Kenny, Olivia, and Sarah, while some managed to awaken out of nowhere, surprising the elders and their peers. Jackson Maxwell was of them, a fog element user with the spectral owl bloodline. No one believed that he was going to awaken successfully, as he fainted throughout the entire mock practice. Regardless, he didn't give up on awakening for real, and the elders weren't allowed to take his bloodline unless he explicitly agreed to give up. Thus, they could only watch him risk his life, knowing that his chances were null. After all, he failed the mock practice miserably. It was only natural to assume that he was going to fail the awakening as well. However, he defied everyone's expectations when he managed to remain conscious throughout the entire process. When the elders asked him how he felt, he answered that it wasn't as bad as what he experienced in the mock practice. In fact, he wasn't the only one who said so, as the rest of the juniors who awakened successfully with him mentioned the same. From this, the elders and seniors of those juniors realized that Felix and Charlotte were right in their tough-handed approach. It was much better to make the mock practice have the same difficulty as the real awakening during the last 5 days, as even if the juniors failed the practice, they would still have experienced the real awakening, and wouldn't be blindsided during the real test. Not to mention, the casualties were at the bare minimum, since the majority of the juniors decided to give up after realizing that it was impossible for them to even survive the first 5 minutes of awakening, based on their mock practice results. The only ones who went for awakening were the juniors who either succeeded in the mock practice or at least survived the first 10 minutes before passing out. Due to those significant results, Felix earned some brownies from the parents of those children after saving their lives indirectly by his awakening practice approach. But Felix didn't give a crap about their gratitude, as he saved them in the first place only because he had nothing to lose, and it wasn't much of an effort otherwise, he wouldn't even bother. Currently, on the 35th floor, Felix stood together with the 8 awakened juniors. Some of them received easily noticeable mutations, such as Olivia, who had a small growing yellow lily flower on the top of her head, making her cuteness reach a new level. However, the elders and Felix merely sighed after seeing this mutation happen to her during the awakening, as they knew that it wasn't possible anymore to pat her head. The gentle-looking flower acted like a protective helmet for Olivia, and she couldn't get any happier about it. Then there was Kenny, who received a somewhat low-key mutation, as dark shades covered both of his eyes, making him even harder to read. Meanwhile, some did not undergo any mutation at all, as they remained exactly the same, just like Noah, nothing changed about him or added. But, it was understandable since not everyone could receive mutations from an awakening with just 1%. It all depended on luck. The only certain way to get them was by increasing the dose of the injection as much as possible. Nevertheless, Felix's mutation was still the envy of everyone, as the moment the elders left his room after their interrogation, they announced that he truly awakened under the supervision of Robert. They had to add an elder, otherwise, the rest would start complaining about favoritism. However, the elders thought too much about it, since the juniors' brains excluded all those petty secondary thoughts, and focused only on one thing, and that was one of them truly awakened. They had seen awakened bloodliners many times on the internet and UVR streams, but still, nothing beat seeing the real deal. Thus, they all rushed towards Felix's room, like a debt collector coming to pay a visit. Felix already anticipated their arrival, since he heard the announcement as well, so he left the door wide open and sat in the same chair, feeling like some endangered animal on public display. As soon as they arrived and saw his new outlook, they went bonkers in his room, chatting and asking billions of questions about his process of awakening and mutations. The boys envied the purple slits that made him appear dangerous and elegant at the same time, while the girls never stopped harassing him to let them touch his hair or smell its natural spring fragrance. In spite of that, Felix only felt annoyed by the whole farce, as he truly believed that his mutations were quite trash compared to what he saw in his past life. Alas, those teenagers cared only about dashing mutations, and not about their usefulness in battles. Meanwhile, above the stage, the elders kept viewing those juniors with a foolish grin, ruining the serious atmosphere of the gathering. But who could blame them, though? Every time they imagined the jealous looks of other families after seeing their 9 awakened juniors during the upcoming U.S. national team battle, that grin gets fixed on their faces without any way to remove it. Because based on Charlotte intel, the majority of the business families in the U.S. only had 4 awakened, while their true rivals had a maximum total of 7 awakened. So for their Maxwell family to have 2 extra members on their rivals was truly a gratifying thing to see. Charlotte fake coughed to wake up those foolish geezers from their imagination, since everyone was looking at them weirdly. Too bad, her attempt didn't change anything, so she could only walk up the podium and take it from there. It seems Elder Abraham is not on his peak form, so I will be the one who will inform you about what you should expect on the second stage of the training camp. She paused for a bit to see if she had everyone's attention and added, the second stage of the camp will teach you how to integrate the remaining 98% without issues. In addition, To help you reach at least lesser purity before the third stage of the camp, keep in mind that not all of you will reach it. The juniors were a bit skeptical at her certain tone, but Felix knew why she was confident in her claim. Since in this stage, the goats would be separated from the sheep. Or in other words, it's finally time to see who was going to have a smooth path ahead of him, and who was going to struggle his entire life just to break through the purification realm. The method the elders were going to use was simple actually, and that was to separate them based on their affinity rating. Those with 40% or below would form the below average group. Those with 40% to 60% would form the average group. Those with 60% to 80% would form the gifted group. As for 80% to 100%, humans born with that affinity were as rare as a triple elemental user. The reason why the affinity rating was the true decider of whether someone was going to have a smooth path or not, was simply because the higher an elemental affinity a bloodliner had, the faster the body was able to adapt to the bloodline it was merged with. After all, in every integration, the human DNA gets broken apart and reconstructed it again, but this time with the beast genes merged with it. Author note: just like the scene in the first Spider-Man movie, where Peter Parker got bit by the spider. I will post the link in the comment section. Thus, it was natural that an adaptation period, or what the majority called the cool-down period, was a normal outcome since the body wouldn't be able to handle having its DNA constantly broken apart and rearranged again, without even taking a breather in the process. However, the elemental affinity was able to hasten this adaptation period, to the point it could even remove it entirely. This was one of the main reasons why humans were only able to awaken with beasts that had the same elemental affinity as them. Otherwise, the body would immediately reject the bestial bloodline, and either explode or enter a state of shock, just like it was rejecting an organ donated by someone. If we reverse this reason, we can easily infer that the body of a bloodliner with a high elemental affinity rating would accept the foreign genes of the beast with open arms, nullifying the adaptation period, or even removing it entirely. In a different sense, the integration process was the same as an organ transplantation operation, and the affinity rating was the decider whether the body would accept the organ or reject it, and if it did accept it, how long it would take before the body could recover its peak form. Felix was desperate to raise his affinity no matter what, just for this reason, as he knew that with his 59% poison affinity rating, he would need at least 24 days cool-down period between each integration. His cooldown wasn't even that bad when compared to bloodliners with a 1% affinity rating. Such a garbage affinity forces them to wait for at least 2 months before they could integrate again. One should only imagine how long it would take them to reach the peak of the purification realm with such a messed up cooldown. This was how the sheep were split from the goat in the human bloodline system. There was no such thing as born genius or prodigy, due to comprehensive ability or something in that sense. The only thing that mattered was whether one was lucky enough to be born with a high affinity to smoothen his path, or born with trash affinity that would make his life hell. It was all about luck and fortune. Noah, who had a whopping 70% affinity rating, was beyond lucky, as it meant he was able to integrate every 18 days. Plus, with his hard-working no-bullshit personality, he would never idle around, or give up his bloodline path as the majority did after not being able to handle the continuous torture of each integration. This was how humans cultivate, or in this case integrate, to obtain their strengths. Even though their system was painful and long, humans still choose to tread it, since the moment they stopped, the whole beast invasion situation would resurface again, but with a different race. The universe did not accept weaklings, no matter if it was in the Dark Ages or the current SGA era. After Charlotte explained all the necessary information about the integration process, she separated the 9 juniors into 3 groups. 2 juniors were placed in the C group because of their affinity that was below 40%. 5 juniors were placed in the B group since their affinity did not reach 60%. Kenny and Felix were within it as well. Lastly, the group had only Olivia and Noah, as they both had 65% and 70% affinity respectively. After separating them properly, she said calmly to the grumbling juniors who did not like those settings. You don't have to be upset, as you can always climb up if you performed well, and also fall down if you remain idle and waste our resources. Bored, Felix kept yawning with an absent-minded look, not focusing at all on what Charlotte was saying. He just wanted this gathering to end already. But who could blame him? Everything that she said, he already had knowledge of, and everything that she was promising as a reward, he could obtain better by himself. At this point, the entire training camp had no meaning to him but a waste of time. The merit shop turned to be a disappointment. The AP bracelet that he planned to work hard to obtain, he already secured it before the camp even started. So in a sense, it was quite meaningless to remain in the camp anymore, but he couldn't just go ahead and tell the elders that he wanted to quit, as they would skin him alive if he mentioned anything about lazing around while having a legendary rank bloodline within him. Plus, Felix didn't want to ruin his chances of joining the Earthlings representative team, by going against the family board. He would rather play house obediently with his cousins than to go on his way and struggle to reach the world representative battle by participating in public qualifications. He wasn't a fool to let go of his family tie, that had an already secured spot within the US national team battle, and go struggle within the sea of commoners, who were trying to do the same. A couple of hours later, Felix wore his pajamas and lay on the bed comfortably, planning to log inside the UVR and place his bet on the second game that he remembered clearly on his mind. Although there were still 4 days before its official start, Felix couldn't wait to empty his bank account on his bet. He struggled inside the UVR for way too long, just to save each coin, in order to increase his earning after the game. God knows how many lines and queues he had to stay on during the past month. Heck, sometimes he didn't even log in for 3 days to 5 days, just to not get lured to watch a movie, play an online video game, or even visit the Red District. Too many distractions were within the UVR, and for a somewhat rich lord like Felix, they were the greatest honey traps. Thus, he entered the UVR only when necessary in the past month, but now, the game he was waiting for desperately was finally here. Felix couldn't but call eagerly in his mind, "Queen, log me in." It was time to earn some free coins. Chapter 67, The Unforgettable Lesson. Chapter 67, The Unforgettable Lesson. The moment Felix logged in, he directly took a hover cab towards the gambling den. 20 minutes later, he exited the den with a grin after successfully emptying his entire bank account that had 64 million SC. He left only 10,000 as an emergency. Felix obtained 45 million SC from selling the filtered Anamamba bloodline after successfully integrating the last 4% of the Hormongandra bloodline he found inside the bottle. This happened 5 days prior, after his cool-down period went off. He wasn't lazing around during the past month, as he went from a store to another seeking to sell his bottle to the shop owners. He had to throw his net a bit wide since each shop owner offered a different price. However, all of their offers were a huge ripoff, as some bastards even asked Felix to sell it at 45% cheaper. For those greedy F***ers, Felix only spat on their faces and escaped. What else could he have done? His reputation wasn't good enough to support his claim that his bottle had 75% plus essence. Heck, he wasn't even able to sell it directly to the buyers due to it. After all, how could they trust in his words? They fell for the same trick so many times, it wasn't even funny anymore. Thus, Felix sadly had to settle with selling his bottle at 30% cheaper after spending days searching around for a shop owner in a good mood to offer him that price. None of this would have happened if he was able to return the bottle to Luby and ask for a refund. Too bad, doing so in this industry was extremely unprofessional and abhorred upon. Felix didn't want to irk Luby this early. He still needed to take advantage of him. The only good news about all of this was the fact that Brother Fatty agreed to deliver the filtered bottle to the buyer, after he met up with Felix during his potions delivery. After all, Felix had to buy them again for the second integration. Since Felix was making an off-record delivery without contacting proper channels for so, he had to bribe Fatty with 20,000 SC to make it happen. However, Felix wasn't complaining much about the bribe, as it was much better than paying the original basic 150,000 SC just to deliver one bottle. The wormhole company's minimum payment was always 150,000 SC. It didn't matter if Felix wanted to deliver a chewing gum or nail. 4 days later, 1900 hours PM. Felix sat with his usual cheering outfit on, within millions of fans in a Coliseum sports stadium that had 10 layers of seating, each contained a couple millions of fans. Weirdly, at least 60% of those fans were females from all shapes and types, wearing a pink t-shirt that had a gorgeous male face, smiling warmly with glittering gray eyes designed on it. One look at that face and any shallow female would fall over heels for him. Shortly after, every one of those females cheered out loud with flushed cheeks until their throats went dry, deafening all the poor males in the audience, who came to spectate the game to cheer for their pets or loved ones. But, after seeing the same gorgeous male that was on their t-shirt teleport on the playing field with a warm smile on, they understood why. Nonetheless, they still grumbled with frowned eyebrows at those superficial females, who were cheering like fangirls. Felix's bet was not on this man white asterisk re, but on a completely random average individual, who was only in this game to add numbers. Regardless, Felix still bet on him to win, as he knew that this game would have a twist that was going to teach every player an unforgettable lesson for eternity. Trying his best to hold his laughter, Felix's lips kept quivering at the sight of the gray-eyed idol, getting interviewed by the MC over his goals and wishes. Hee, sadly your only wish after this game is for it to be completely erased from everyone's memories. Not able to hold it back anymore, he let out a wicked laugh with his chin raised and arms spread apart like a madman. However, not a single female near him paid attention to him or his words. The only thing that was in their eyes, was the gorgeous face of their idol. The half hour of the interview quickly passed by, as the MC used the full duration to shower the gray-eyed idol with all kinds of questions. Some were about this game, while the majority were about his private life. Yet, no one complained about this mic hoarding, except for the players who were seething with suppressed rage over being undervalued by the MC and the pretty boy like this. Every player had a hidden evil glint in their eyes, as they kept watching the MC and the idol flatter each other after the interview ended. No matter if they were males or females players, none of them liked what they were seeing. Still, they only stood silently between two white lines that stretched for over 5 kilometers in a wide circle inside the stadium that appeared just like Earthlings running track stadiums. But, on a much bigger scale and more advanced technologically. This game was one of the popular sports format based named Unlawful Marathon. As the current 50 players were required to run 10 laps around the track, which meant a whopping 50 kilometers of distance. However, this was just the condition required to win the game. The real entertainment came from the fact that rules were completely non-existent. The players could do whatever they wanted to win the race without any repercussions. Anything was allowed, from hindering competitors using their own bloodline abilities, to making teams and defend from others' attacks. The only rule that stood in the field was to run properly the 10 laps after hearing the countdown hit 0. One could only imagine the chaos and massacre that was about to happen at the starting line, where everyone was still in one pack. If it wasn't for such a gruesome scene, the audience wouldn't have bothered spending money to come and watch live. Damn, still as invisible as ever, Felix's eyelids twitched at the sight of a short player, lining up at the leftmost side of the track, unnoticed by anyone. If he wasn't playing with his long green tail by rolling it onward, then stretching it straight again continuously, Felix would have honestly found it quite difficult to spot him. This was the player he bet all of his capital on. Oh, it seems that the main event is about to start. Felix chuckled immediately after switching his vision from his bet to the man white asterisk re, who was sandwiched in the middle of the track by a resentful mob. But, it seemed like the idol didn't notice any of this, or simply didn't bother to do so. He just kept his warm smile on his face, while stretching his limbs under the screams of females fans. After all, he was the son of a well-known governor within the Alexander Kingdom who would dare to kill him live. Even beating him excessively was an unforgivable crime. Unfortunately, his shenanigans over the last couple of years had started to rub the players off immensely. This wasn't the first time he hogged the mic like this, but just one of the many times. Too bad for him, it seemed like this would be the last one, as well. As the moment the reverse countdown reached 0, every player ganged up on him and started beating the shit out of him, without using their bloodline abilities, since they just wanted to teach him a lesson and not kill him. A governor's position was not to be taken lightly. So after a few moments of threshing him up to vent their anger, they left him lying on the track with a disfigured face and ripped off clothes, showing bruised parts of his body. Yet, the worst part was that his nether region was in full display, showing a minuscule worm between his legs. The moment his messed up appearance was highlighted on the large screen, females all over the stadium either fainted from shock or cursed out loud at the assailant's vicious beating, but the majority of them broke off their spell and gave a disdainful look at his worm. Meanwhile, the men laughed their asses off after seeing the man white asterisk lying on the floor, like he just got run over by a herd of buffaloes. Especially Felix, whose tears never stopped gushing out from laughing so hard. Although, he already saw the scene that turned into an iconic meme over 100 times in his past life, he never got bored of it, not even once. There was always a hidden joy when seeing someone fall off, or fail a stunt. Don't even mention seeing an arrogant idol get beat up live without mercy. This was the lesson that everyone learned in this game. Never hoard the mic for too long, otherwise, your fate would be the same as his. Coming here was truly worth it. Felix let a few last chuckles and switched his vision from the idol that was being carried on a stretcher to the player he bet on, but he could not find him anywhere. As expected, he really can camouflage himself perfectly using his chameleon bloodline active ability. After understanding that his bet was already active in the field, he immediately switched his normal vision to heat vision by using the enhancement he bought. His bet took advantage of the players' distraction during their threshing and bolted away first. He was almost close to finishing half a lap while the rest were still struggling to even leave the pack without being bombed by some ability. He kept running on his four limbs while being completely hidden from both the contestants and the audience, who never bothered to pay attention to such an average player. However, he never dared to slow his speed down for even a bit, since he would easily get noticed by those with senses passive abilities, such as heat vision, or echolocation as for active abilities. Any element that touched him would break off his light-bending invisibility. If it wasn't for such glaring weaknesses, his bloodline wouldn't have been ranked as uncommon. So he ran with a fixed pace, keeping a quite good distance away from them. If he kept going like this, finishing the 10 laps without anyone's knowledge wouldn't be impossible. He didn't need to run a lap or two around them to be dashing for the audience, but merely keep a fixed distance, and no one could ever catch up or harm him. This race was designed as such. Anyone who managed to leave the pack safely would have better chances of emerging victorious. However, the moment someone got stuck inside, he would remain there until he either dropped dead, get heavily injured and sidelined, or simply depend on luck and win after one last sprint. Too bad no matter what those players try to do, it would always remain futile, as one was running ahead of them without their knowledge. After 2 hours of constant running and bashing each other, the remaining 16 players or so finally reached the last half lap, and so, using every ounce of their energy, they sprinted without care about those near them. It was like a tactical agreement made in silence to just fight it out in one final sprint without attacking each other. Peep. Unfortunately, before they even passed 100 meters, a familiar loud buzzing noise resounded in the stadium, marking the emergence of the champion. Dumbfounded and quite speechless, everyone had their eyes gaping at the large screen that was showcasing a man standing upright at the end of the track with a relieved, happy smile on his face after winning probably his first game ever. After all, his bloodline was uncommon ranked. To actually clutch the championship with such a trash rank that everyone looked down upon, was a feat worthy of respect and applause. Too bad, the only one who was cheering and applauding was Felix, who was shouting at the top of his voice in excitement over the massive windfall that was about to fill his bank account. His excitement is quite understandable since the winning chances of this random lad were 1 in 7. Which was quite large considering that only 50 participants were in this game. While those with higher chances of winning had only 1 in 11 ratings, quite pathetic in comparison. Felix already calculated in his head that if his bet turned successful, he would earn a whopping 480 million SC. $500 million from only one game. Anyone would have their jaws dropped after hearing this amount, which could turn their lives upside down. But Felix's excitement died down gradually, as he remembered that he still needed to obtain more and more, and never stop obtaining coins if he wanted his bottomless bloodline path to keep moving forward. If only he watched clips on other games that went viral in this period, he could bet $500 million all at once on one of them. Sadly, his memory was completely blank. So, for the next upcoming 5 years, he was thoroughly blind to the game's results, which killed his gambling strategy at once. Nevertheless, Felix didn't mope about it for too long, since he still had his investment plan that might turn even better than making money from gambling. After all, every coin he earned from his investment would have an impact on his reputation if he kept on investing successfully without failing. It wouldn't be long before he begins to receive invitations to closed-off auctions, high-class public gatherings, and events that he desperately needed to be part of, in order to obtain resources that never reached the public markets. Like the elemental potion. Or at least its materials needed to create it. Chapter 68, The Holy Sinful City. Chapter 68, The Holy Sinful City. Felix left the stadium under the thunderous cheers of the audience over having such a dark horse as their champion. The audience never hated cheering for the underdogs, even if they lost a bet on the process. He immediately took a cab towards the gambling den to transfer the coins to his bank account. He exited the den with an even wider grin than he entered with before. Without further ado, he started his investment plan by heading to the teleportation company, planning to pay a visit to the Oblivion Film Studio, the production company responsible for producing the movie Human Melodies. He didn't want to waste any more time since only 1 month was left before the official release of the movie. Therefore, his investment opportunities on the movie had already shrunk to a large degree, leaving him only with marketing and advertisements. But that was enough for him, as he knew that the more spotlights were on the movie, the bigger the reception would be. In turn, the words would spread quicker about this hidden gem, making it a blockbuster movie much faster than in his previous life, when it took at least a month before it truly drew the attention of everyone in the Alexander's kingdom. This way he would return his investment capital plus a windfall of profits after it goes viral everywhere much earlier than expected. After a while, he reached the teleportation company and paid the fees to pass the queue this time. He walked inside the device and clicked on the destination he planned to head to. The studio was in a different city after all. Felix sat in a coffee shop, wearing a business suit, and drinking bloodish thick coffee that had a soul-capturing aroma. Felix took a small sip with closed eyes in contentment, then said composedly to a bearded man sitting in front of him, "Sir, I know that your movie had some difficulties during the production period." He began mentioning some of them, using a finger for each problem: investors pulling out, actors losing faith during the filming, cut scenes leaked by your own staff, and much more. Felix closed his spread-out fingers into a tight fist and said passionately, "But you managed to pull through all of them." "Sure, it was a difficult process that drained all of your budget, but still, you did it." Felix opened his tight fist and left only one finger extending upward while adding in temptation, "But you only have one more step to take, just one, that is to advertise your work that might turn out to be the masterpiece of the year to everyone to see. I am not talking about the normal advertisement of releasing only one trailer online and praying to draw some interest." He shook his finger and continued, "No sir, I am talking about a kingdom-wide advertisement that will feature your movie trailer or poster in every notable website, every screen in the Supremacy Games, and every billboard in those neon streets. I am talking about pumping 300 million SC into pure advertisement for over 1 week continuously until everyone in the kingdom must watch it to soothe their curiosity." Felix suddenly stood up and put both of his hands on the table and smiled confidently. That's what I am willing to offer you for only 40% of shares in your movie. You spent 2 hours harassing my staff to get me here, so you can say this preposterous offer. The man scratched his gray beard in irritation and asked, "Are you out of your damn mind? I honestly do not see any absurdity in my offer. It is as sincere as it can get." Felix took a quick sip to fuel his throat for the upcoming negotiation, then said unhurriedly, "Mr. Cosby, you do realize that I am taking a huge risk by gambling on your movie. After only seeing a few scenes that were leaked, I am putting my entire fortune on your movie success, so it is only fair I can expect some good returns. Don't you think?" he asked. Mr. Cosby neither agreed nor disagreed with his claim. He simply said his own piece. "But do you honestly think that 40% of shares on a movie that I spent my blood and sweat producing are only worth 300 million SC? Aren't you looking down on me too much, Mr. Felix?" He questioned Felix calmly, without a hint of anger or humiliation in his expression, as he claimed. Felix chuckled softly while pointing at himself in derision. "Do you honestly believe that I am dumb enough, stupid to such a degree, to invest in a movie without investigating everything about you and your staff?" He laid his question without expecting an answer. He simply continued his mocking while shaking his head. "No, no, no, my dear Mr. Cosby, I already did my due diligence and found everything there is about your movie, from the good to the bad, and believe me, there is more bad than good on my list." His eyes turned rigid instantly and added, "If you think that my price is wrong or low, then you are the one who is looking down at my capabilities, Mr. Cosby, as my offer is perfect for what I have written on my list." Felix, without waiting for Mr. Cosby to ask about it, immediately displayed holographic list mid-air that only he and the producer could see. The moment Mr. Cosby saw those scandals that he put a large amount of money and manpower to bury, his composed expression couldn't help but break, as his pupils enlarged for a few seconds, but he quickly blinked and his pupils were back to normal like nothing happened. Felix did not miss such a hint after all. Everything that he wrote in the list was merely pieces of what he remembered about the scandals between actors and staff within the movie crew. He was simply fishing for weaknesses that might keep his shares as close as possible to his offer, and the producer just handed him the ammo after his suspicious reaction. Felix immediately went on offense after he got what he wanted. "Now can you tell me whether my offer was plausible or not? I am putting my money, my reputation, my everything in a movie that is filled with problems both ways, outside and inside. If it was not for the beautiful scenes that captured my attention, I would not even dare to put a dime in your irresponsible crew." His aggressive approach was smoothly replaced by a softer one, "But I am still willing to follow my investment instinct and take a gamble on this one. So Mr. Cosby, one last time, are you willing to cooperate with me and accept my fair offer, or are you willing to throw the dice all by yourself, without a single coin in your budget to market your movie?" Felix asked calmly. Meanwhile, his heart was pumping faster and faster from nervousness. A few minutes later, of drinking coffee silently, Mr. Cosby stood up from the table while fixing his suit. Felix's heart immediately sank, as he thought that his aggressive approach before might have offended the producer. Fortunately, a sentence from Mr. Cosby managed to calm his heart a bit. "Make it 35% and I will think about it." "I apologize, but that's impossible." He shook his head and clarified, "The best offer I can give you is 39%, and that's only because I loved your other works. Otherwise, you won't even get that 1% removed, since my offers are always fair and within reason to avoid those kinds of long-winded negotiations." "All right, I will think about it with my crew." Mr. Cosby sighed over not being able to successfully cleave more percentages. But 1% was still quite a lot, considering that 40% had 300 million SC worth. "You will hear from me a week before the movie release." Mr. Cosby smiled and offered a handshake. Satisfied about how things turned out, Felix shook the producer's hand after the first part of the deal was done. He then paid for the coffee and left the shop. Now, the only thing left was to wait patiently for them to call him, unless there were variables, such as other investors intervening after seeing that someone heavily pumped funds on a movie they labeled as unprofitable. This was Mr. Cosby's reason for not agreeing at once. He wanted to delay the deal's conclusion as much as possible, since the more variables resurfaced in that period, the lower the shares Felix was going to hold. Felix understood what was on Mr. Cosby's mind, as he didn't even hide it from him. However, Felix had his own plans to reduce those variables to the limit, if not completely uproot them. Anyone who had thoughts of competing against him for the shares, would have to think twice about it. After leaving the cafe shop, Felix wandered around the dense neon streets with hands in his pockets for about 10 minutes now. "Handsome, why don't you come and play? Big bother, our establishment has everything that you desire." Felix mused while walking near a bunch of escorts that were calling him flirtatiously to enter their establishment for some taste, yet he merely shook his head in rejection with a polite smile. This is already his 5th catcalling since he entered the center of entertainment in Alexander's UVR territory. The Holy Sinful City. A strange name, but an understandable one, as the city was known for being the holy ground of all entertainment platforms. Movies, series, games, animations, shows, streams, and other more interesting platforms. Anyone who desired to be an actor, gamer, designer, movie director, streamer, and any other career that included entertainment, must come here to seek opportunities. Meanwhile, the sinful part in the name entailed the enjoyment of those entertainment establishments by the customers. From casinos, red districts, game centers, cinemas, conventions, and many more that would make anyone's head spinning just from their bright neon light and never-ending crowd noises. This city was the perfect combination of Hollywood, Akihabara, and Las Vegas all together to form one massive entertainment giant that never sleeps. Thus, the nickname Neon Streets. Felix walked only 100 meters before he got catcalled again to come inside and play, but this time, he pondered seriously whether to enter or not, as he truly did not get laid for over a long time. For a playboy like him who slept with plenty of girls in his previous life, it was truly quite humiliating. But to do it with escorts or go hunt for girls in bars this night currently, he had no idea what should he do. "Fuck it, I am not that desperate to pay for sex yet, let's go for some hunting. I hope I did not get rusty." He immediately rejected the offer and entered a bar near him, hoping for a nightstand to celebrate his investment deal. 1 hour later he was kicked off the bar with bruises and blood all over his face. He threw some insults at the 2 bodyguards who threw him outside and walked away from the entrance, making grumbling noises under his breath. "How do the f***ck would I have known that she is your wife?" He spat some blood in irritation. "Wear a ring at least, you seductive b***tch. Sadly, Felix's hunting mission ended quite early after hitting on the wrong woman at the wrong time. Thus, concluding his night with bruises on his face and unfulfilled desire. Chapter 69, Affinity Enhancement. Chapter 69, Affinity Enhancement. The next day, Felix went for the second shopping spree, in order to obtain all the necessary resources needed for the upcoming integrations, using the 180 million SC that wasn't invested. First, he bought the 1,000 discounted medium and high-grade stones from Fuzzia shop. He finally had enough capital to begin his affinity enhancement, and he had no reason to delay anymore, especially after he tested with Asna the required duration and amount needed for both of those stones to help him reach 100% from 59%. Which was a staggering 100,000 medium stone for a year of continuous daily absorption. Meanwhile, the high-grade stone would take him merely a 1-month duration of absorption. But he would need 10,000 stones that cost at least 20,000 CS each, and that's only if he managed to find them in such a large amount. Their rarity was no joke after all. So in total, if he planned to only use medium stones, he would need to pay 100 million to reach the peak, but if he wanted to lower the duration of absorption by using high stones, it would cost him 200 million or more, since he wouldn't be able to find them always with that price, especially since he planned to buy a huge amount of them. That's why the deal with Fuzzia shop was quite good to him, since it was hard to secure 1,000 high-grade stone all at once, and even with a 10% discount. After Felix bought them, he went to Mr. Piggy's resourceful shop to order 20 bottles each of double percentage potions, rejuvenation potions, and lastly pain relief potions. Felix was probably the only human who needed to use the pain relief potion after awakening, since they were only useful to lower the duration to the minimum during the awakening process. But in the following integrations, it was completely useless for others, because the duration of each following integration was merely 5 minutes. So there was no point in buying them anymore. But in the case of Felix, who had triple the duration even when he used 4 potions during the awakening, it only meant one thing, and that was the integration would always have 15 minutes duration, a massive contrast to 5 minutes. But he couldn't complain much about it. He was the one who chose this difficult path, and he would make sure to walk through it to the end. He only hoped that the returns would justify the hardship. After completing his order, he directly headed to Luby's bloodline shop, planning to buy the cheapest tier 5 bloodline he could find, hoping to luck out on some Hormone-Gondra bloodline essence within it. Although, 30% of the price was always going to be wasted whether he found the Hormone-Gondra essence or not, still, at least when he found some, the pain of reselling the potion cheaper could be somewhat tolerated. On the other hand, if he found none, it would be the same as throwing 30% of the price down the drain after reselling it. Nothing hurt Felix more than that, a pure waste of hard-earned money, but he could only grit his teeth and do it. Author note: earning money through gambling is hard-earned for Felix, apparently XD. And so, he left the shop after paying 120 million SC for a rare tier 5 bloodline, and this was even with a 5% discount. This just showed that no matter how many coins Felix made, it would always be insufficient to support him. After all, the prices of high-tier and high-ranked beasts were beyond imaginary, and Felix had to target only the best if he wanted to have high chances of finding the Hormone-Gondra bloodline. 3 days later, the fatty worm delivered Felix's items to his room and left in a haste, like being around Felix was an insult to his existence. Felix never bothered or cared about this fatty opinion or behavior. The only thing that mattered to him was to have his stuff delivered safely without delay. Felix quickly put all of the items that were laying on the ground in his spatial card. Afterward, he sat on the carpet while leaving only the high-grade stones. He didn't plan to use the medium-grade stones for his affinity enhancement, but keep them as a tool for recovering his elemental energy in the future. After all, elemental stones were primarily used for recovery. Esna, wake up, please, it's time to start the affinity enhancement, Felix called politely without acting spiteful like he always does, as his immunity training was still not finished. He really didn't want the same to happen, as last time when he woke her up for the second integration. That day his immunity training shenanigan was almost discovered by Isna after she called him sweetie with a seductive tone to let her continue sleeping. Felix almost had his heart burst after imagining her calling him like that while sleeping seductively with her breathtaking beauty. Fortunately, Esna was too sleepy to pay attention to his reaction or read his thoughts. That's why Felix decided to keep minimum contact with her and call her only when it was necessary. Just like in this case. Esna? I know that you are hearing me. Wake up already to get this over with. Felix repeatedly called for her, yet still no answer. Finally, not able to handle it, he began cursing like usual. You old witch, do you only respond to curses and sticks like a donkey or what? He added in vexation while rubbing his eyebrows, can't you just listen for once without having me insulting you? Esna murmured softly while covering herself tightly with the blanket. Put your hands on the stones, let me see if I can absorb them while asleep. Felix didn't know whether to laugh or cry at this new level of laziness, but he still did as he was told and put a stone on his hand. A moment later, he saw a dark green mist of energy enters through the pores of his hands rapidly. After seeing so, he didn't let a single peep about her lazy way of absorbing the stones. Awake or asleep, he didn't give a crap. As long as she gets the job done, he wouldn't mind her sleeping for eternity. Shortly after, the entire stone turned dark and broke into small pieces, marking the successful absorption. However, Felix felt nothing, like there was a black hole inside his body sucking all the energy, leaving him none. Keep them coming, Isna requested softly while drooling with a foolish smile. One can only wonder what she was dreaming about. Felix kept holding one stone after another, and each time he finished absorbing one, only cracked black stone was left behind. This process lasted for over an hour until all high-grade stones he bought were absorbed by Isna. Felix stared at the heap of cracked stones that were laying in front of him in anguish. 18 million SC worth of materials just got devoured within an hour. But his pained expression instantly got replaced with contentment, as pure elemental energy that he never experienced before, caressed his body gently, like a mother-warm embrace. Felix asked with his eyes closed in utter euphoria, "What's going on, Isna? Why do I feel like my body is being caressed gently by the universe?" Isna did not explain fully all the details. She merely gave him the shortest explanation ever with a soft murmur: absorb, purify, enhance. Felix did not lash out at her, as at this point, the only thing that he was focusing on was enjoying this pleasure that beat anything he felt before. Unfortunately, the intensity of it got weaker and weaker by time, until his body returned to its original state. Felix opened his eyes with a hint of regret. After it was over, he knew that there must be a limit to how much he could enhance his affinity on daily basis, otherwise, Isna would not have given him duration during the process. He could have simply absorbed everything within an hour and reached a peak. The only thing he could not figure out was why, so he was currently between two reasons. 1. It was due to a digestion period, since the body couldn't keep absorbing such a heavenly pure energy continuously without consequences. 2. Isna had a limit to the amount of energy she could purify on daily basis, thus, he could only get fed after she reached her full capacity. Fuck, why does the second theory sounds more like breastfeeding? He exclaimed in exasperation at the close similarity between them. Well, getting breastfed by Isna might not be that bad. The instant that thought appeared in his mind, he automatically began his well-trained defensive protocol. Red sheep, blue sheep, everyone is sheep, me sheep, he sheep, 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 sheep. He kept mentioning sheep over and over again, to bury that thought deep within, so Isna wouldn't be able to find it later when she gets bored and start reading his memories. After all, if she wanted to find that thought exactly, she had to listen to him mentioning sheep for over 10 minutes continuously. Felix used this protocol every time his thoughts had a relation to Isna's beauty, and so far he was still not found. After seeing that he said more than enough, Felix stopped and slapped both of his cheeks to regain his focus. He then exiled all of those thoughts that might expose him to Isna. After doing so, his thinking returned optimal again and began to ponder deeply about the unlikeness of the second theory being correct. After all, Isna could literally absorb and purify energy while asleep without a single effort or a problem. So, it was only within reason that she wasn't going to have any difficulties afterward. On the other hand, the first theory sounded more plausible, as humans' bodies couldn't handle the purest elemental energy in the universe, just like other races that were born to eat it for lunch. This meant, his body was the one limiting him regardless. He could only sigh dejectedly over this unsolvable situation, and absorb the energy that Isna was going to hand him each day obediently. Shortly after, he retrieved the mountain of broken stones in his spatial card and called for the Queen to scan him, hoping to see if there was any improvement in his affinity rating. So, with crossed fingers, he read his results that were being displayed on a hologram. / race, human. Gender, male. Element affinity, poison, illusion. Affinity rating. Poison, 605%. Illusion, 12%. Immediately after seeing his affinity rating, he could only smile foolishly after finally taking a successful first step towards 100%. Chapter 70, The Third Integration. Chapter 70, The Third Integration. 8 days quickly passed by. Felix spent the majority of time in his room either absorbing the daily dose of enhancement from Isna or scouting for auctions in the UVR, that he could attend with his pathetic social status in order to buy either high-energy natural treasures or high-grade stones. Luckily he did find some and bought a large number of high-grade stones that would allow him to carry on his enhancement after the first batch was devoured by Isna and him. Now that his integration cooldown had passed, he was about to start the third integration. Felix already had everything prepared, from potions to bloodline. The only thing he was missing was checking if the rare tier 5 bloodline he bought had the Hormungandr bloodline within or not. So without any further delays, he took a deep breath, sitting in his room, and injected a large needle that was filled with half of the bottle content in his heart. Yet, he still didn't stop. He removed the empty needle from his heart and put it on the half-full bottle, planning on injecting the remaining 50% as well. He wanted to split the bloodlines apart first and integrate every percentage of the Hormungandr that Asna found all at once, but that's only if she managed to find any in the first place. This strategy might be on the risky side since Felix would have to deal with quite a hefty sum of pain waves. Nonetheless, it would help him minimize the number of integrations he needed in the future. At least, until he lowered the cooldown duration to the minimum by his affinity enhancement. At that point, he wouldn't need to torture himself as he planned on doing now. You can begin with crossed fingers, he instructed Asna to begin checking on the Hormungandr bloodline. Asna didn't wait for him to order her around, as she was already reading the memories of the bloodline immediately after it entered his bloodstream. A couple of seconds later, she exclaimed in astonishment, "You lucky bastard, this one has 10% of Hormungandr inside, as well as some useful memories of the primogenitor." Excited and thrilled at hearing such God-sent news, Felix tightened his fists while laughing out loud. He truly hit the jackpot on this one. He believed that he would come out empty-handed this time, or at least find measly 2% or 3%. After all, the ancestral bloodline was not within every poisonous beast in the universe but only within a selected few high-tiered beasts. So for Felix to obtain a whopping 10% all at once from merely one tier 5 bloodline was truly a win he needed desperately. As Noah, Olivia, and some of his cousins had already started their second integration or were about to. It was quite a joke honestly that he had awakened a month or so earlier than them but was still struggling to reach lesser purity. But it's all good now. With this 10% plus the 5% he already had, he would reach 15% and unlock the first passive ability of Hormungandr. This was the moment that would decide whether his choice of choosing this demanding path was a good move or not. Asna interrupted his excitement with a hurried voice, "Stop laughing, you moron, and start drinking the potions." She already finished separating the bloodlines, and the only thing left was for Felix to finish his preparation. Felix instantly drank them, with a hint of terror in his eyes after being reminded that he was literally going to integrate with 10% all at once. Heck, Felix never planned on integrating with such a large amount at once. He wasn't a psycho or masochist. He honestly believed that if he lucked out on the Hormungandr bloodline, it would be 6% or 7% max. Truly, his strategy fucked him over, as now he was going to deal with 5 waves of hellish pain that would last for 15 minutes. "Noah. I take it back. Asna, please split the percentage." Desperate and quite scared, Felix quickly drank potion by potion, while begging in between for Asna to help him out and reduce the percentage to at least 5%. He was confident in handling that amount, but 10%? He honestly wasn't that optimistic. Although the pain degree would be much less than what he experienced during the awakening since it was his body's very first time, still, 5 waves all at once was enough to break him apart. Hee, why ask when you know my answer? Asna laughed deviously, uncaring about Felix's pitiful begging. "Well, *CKU then." He cursed her hatefully and ignored her all at once. He closed his eyes and began taking deep breaths in and out, while shaking his shoulders, hoping to somewhat remove the stiffness he was feeling. A minute later, he opened them with fierce gaze, then bravely exclaimed out loud within the room, "Bring it on." Before his voice resounded far in the room, it got quickly replaced by a long wail, resembling a woman cry during giving birth. Arg. His bravery and courage meant jack shit in front of such agony. This was the reason why Isna woke up without any complaints. How could she miss such a hilarious scene of Felix crying like a little B*tch with tears flooding his cheeks, and sweat pouring heavily from his pores, like a water fountain? She kept pointing at him with a shaky finger while laughing hysterically in his mind. Ah, such a bliss! How I wish this bastard can reach 100% affinity faster and go through this hell every day without a cool down, she wished sincerely with folded hands in a praying position. Esna truly loved to relish in his misery, but what else could she do besides that and sleep? After all, she clearly abhorred watching him enjoy living his life through his eyes. It could be easily concluded from the way she spent 6 months watching movies and series, without giving a single glance at Felix's direction. Not to mention the long periods of sleep each day without bothering to wake up. Felix thought it was because she was either lazy or removing her binge-watching fatigue. But honestly, she already recovered from her exhaustion a while ago. The only reason she still kept sleeping was simply because there was nothing to wake up for in Felix's consciousness. Every time she woke up, she only saw gray mist around her, and if she lifted her head, the sight of Felix enjoying his life greeted her, while she was trapped inside indefinitely. So her only enjoyment currently was to watch Felix, who had something she desperately wanted but couldn't have, get tortured like this. Despite her sadistic personality, she still understood that Felix mustn't die no matter what. After all, he was her only ticket to freedom. Thus, each time she saw that he was on the verge of giving up and fainting, she did her job and cheered him on with her angelic sweet voice, boosting him up to remain conscious for a few minutes. As the process was getting closer and closer to its end, Esna stopped laughing all at once and focused only on cheering him on, worrying slightly that he might not make it. She saw that he completely lay on the floor with hazy unfocused eyes and shallow breaths like he was on his deathbed. 10,9,8,73,2,1 15 minutes of one of the deadliest and torturous experiences Felix had gone through, was finally over. However, he still had fallen unconscious in the end. Thankfully, it happened 1 second after the process finished. Hello? Felix? Can you hear me? If you don't wake up, I will browse through your sex memories. Esna kept calling for him out loud, trying to wake him up, but he truly passed out without any response. I hope this bastard did not fall in a coma, she thought worriedly while examining his heartbeats and brain activity. If he ended up in a coma, he might lay on the floor for a couple of days, before his disappearance raised some warning flags. The elders were used to him not getting out of his room for a couple of days in a row, since they assumed that he spent most of his time in the UVR. Esna knew so as well, thus her worry was understandable. Fortunately, after checking on his vitals, she easily figured out that his condition wasn't serious to put him in a coma. At most, he would sleep for 30 hours before waking up. Let's not do that ever again, she sighed in relief at such a close shave, then returned to her bed, planning to continue her slumber until he wakes her up again. An entire day had passed before Felix's body finally showed some reaction. His eyelids quivered lightly, entailing that his eyes were responding. A few seconds later, he opened his eyes groggily with a feeling that his entire body did not belong to him. He tried to move a finger, but it took him an extremely long time and effort to do so. After seeing this, he knew that he needed to drink the rejuvenation potion ASAP. But it was an impossible endeavor in his condition since his entire body was numb from all the pain he went through. So he requested in his mind, Queen AI, send a message to Olivia, telling her to hurry to my room for assistance and add that she brings with her a backup room key. As you wish, Sir Felix. Bang. 4 minutes later, the door of the room was slammed open barbarically. Olivia, who almost broke the door in half by her leg, rushed inside swiftly, like a little rabbit. Felix, what's happened to you? She immediately asked with a panicked voice after seeing his messed up condition and the puddle of sweat underneath him soaking the carpet. Felix did not respond, as he wasn't even capable of opening his mouth. He just requested the queen to convey what he wanted to say. So, the queen repeated everything he told her precisely with her usual monotone voice. "Feed me the potion that's on my right, please, I can't move my body." Although she was puzzled by the whole situation, Olivia still did as she was told, and fed him the potion gently. After drinking it, Felix's numb body began to regain some sensation, making him twitch from time to time, due to the tingling feeling coursing through him. Yet, it was clear that one potion was not enough to fully return his body to peak form after that raging storm left his flesh and bones mashed like pastry. So he kept asking for Olivia to keep them coming. After consuming more than 4 bottles at once, his body was finally showing true signs of true recovery. Minutes passed by slowly, as Olivia watched Felix in bewilderment, regaining feeling in his fingers and toes, then his limbs, until finally standing up straight, making his recovered joints crack by themselves. Relieved, he let out a long sigh and stretched his body thoroughly. After seeing Felix crack his joints comfortably, Olivia asked worriedly, "Do you feel better?" Satisfied by Olivia's timely assistance, Felix stared at her gently and wanted to pat her like always, but his hand froze after seeing the growing lily flower on her head. He smiled wryly and merely touched it softly in appreciation of her help. "It's all thanks to you." He suddenly tapped on his bracelet and withdrew a large box that contained 100 or more medium plant element stones that he bought in the market. "This is some elemental stones to help you recover your energy later on. Accept it as thank you gift, please," Felix explained with a warm smile to the dumbfounded Olivia, who saw a large box suddenly appear out of nowhere. However, immediately after hearing the term "thank you gift," she tried to bolt towards the door, planning to escape. Felix, who was already aware of her shenanigans, instantly blocked her way with unquestionable gaze. "You will take it no matter what. Don't waste my money. You are the only plant user in the family." "But you already know I don't like accepting those gifts," she sulked with her hands fiddling with the corners of her dress. "I am happy to help without anything in return." "But I am not now. Help me by accepting my gift." Felix broke through her defensive maneuver with ease. After hearing the term help, Olivia started to think deeply with a constipated face, whether to accept his gift or not. This was a huge dilemma for her. She was not a fan of accepting gifts, but she couldn't deny a request of help, no matter how insignificant it was. Too bad, Felix was in a rush to check on the passive he unlocked, thus he didn't have time to wait for her until she made a decision. So, he lifted her and the box like they weighed nothing, and placed them in front of the door. He then closed it, while chuckling at Olivia's absent-minded expression. The sound of the door closing broke Olivia out of her daze. She immediately began banging the door with her palm after realizing what had just happened. "Open up, you bully!" she huffed in anger and threatened him. "I will leave the box in front of the door. I don't care. I am not accepting your gift." Regardless, Felix acted deaf to everything she said. After a while, she gave up and walked away with an unhappy pout, but, a few seconds later, she returned and took the box shyly, carrying it on her small shoulder like an ant carrying a piece of rice. If only she knew that Felix had hidden a couple of potions at the bottom of the box, she would have definitely left it in its place. Alas, now that she took it, there was no way that she would return it to Felix. Returning a gift was beyond impolite and on the border of being an insult. One should either accept a gift politely or firmly reject it. Felix didn't mention his true gift that was hidden, just to avoid fighting it out with Olivia's stubborn no thank you gift policy. Chapter 71, Unlocking 2 Passives. Chapter 71, Unlocking 2 Passives. After Felix sent Olivia away, he immediately went to take a shower first and change his dirty clothes. He stepped outside naked with only a short towel covering his nether region. After a while, he got dressed properly and sat on the side of his bed with his eyes closed in deep concentration. Felix was currently reading the newly unlocked information after reaching 15% in integration. This information might only display the name of the ability he unlocked, or sometimes, it might even introduce all the details about it. A few seconds later, he opened his eyes with a dumbstruck expression on his face, not daring to believe what he just read. What the fuck, how could I obtain 2 passives at once? He exclaimed out loud while standing suddenly from the bed after seeing that he unlocked 2 passives from the passive pool. This had never happened before to anyone, not even for a 6th stage bloodliner. Everyone was bound to have only one ability picked from the ability pools after completing each 15% of integration until they reach 99% with a total of 6 abilities, 3 passives, 3 actives. But Felix somehow picked 2 passive at once just from reaching 15% a single time. This is big, this is so fucking huge. Felix gripped his fists tightly in excitement over the meaning of being able to pick 2 abilities each 15%. He understood pretty clearly that if he was able to unlock 2 abilities in each 15%, it meant that in every stage of his bloodline path, he would have a total of 12 abilities. Double the amount of everyone. 6 passives and 6 active abilities. A number only a peak 6th stage bloodliner managed to get after a hellish journey in his bloodline path. But still, Felix might be able to share the same number of abilities as them. It didn't mean that he had the same strength as them. Heck, he would be flattened into pastry by one slap from a bloodliner of such strength. After all, each replacement stage boosted the body, the mental, and the energy tank immensely to the point, a peak 6th stage bloodliner was able to resist a 4th stage most powerful attack merely by his physical or mental defenses. It didn't matter if the attack was elemental, physical, or mental. Such a gap in integration wasn't closed easily by abilities. Nevertheless, Felix, having 12 abilities in the purification stage, where his peers only had 6 abilities, was truly pure bullying. However, all of this was merely a hypothesis of Felix after seeing that he obtained 2 abilities at once. It could be just a one-time thing, or he simply got lucky and picked 2 passives instead of 1. So he self-controlled his excitement and lowered it down a notch. He then started pondering deeply on the cause of this anomaly. Honestly, it was pretty obvious that it must have been the primogenitor bloodline doing. After all, he controlled the poison element like a limb. How could he have a limit to the number of abilities or such bullshit that only commoners like Felix had? It made no sense for a being at the peak of the universe to have such limitations to his strength. This signified that Felix, who merged with its bloodline, should have either the limitation removed, or at least reduced, just like in this case. After analyzing the reason of the anomaly, Felix dropped the matter entirely, since only after reaching the lesser purity would he know if what he concluded was correct or false. Let's take a look at those passives. I hope Lady Luck smile on me and pick something worthy of this bloodline. Felix prayed for good luck with closed eyes, trying to continue reading the information from where he left. A few moments later, he opened his eyes with creases on his forehead, frowning over the passives names that he just read. Super Strength is a pretty standard passive that is known for being one of the best ones in the passive pool. But what the hell is poison immunity? Does it mean I will have complete immunity to all types of poison? Confused and somewhat elated, he scratched his chin and reread the names of the passives he just unlocked. Super Strength and Poison Immunity. He totally ignored the first one, as it was a fairly known ability that could be unlocked from the majority of beasts. However, the second one truly messed up his head, as he never heard of it before. There was no such thing as poison immunity, but merely mild poison resistance, or at best peak poison resistance. As for immunities, that was only possible for a specific type of poison, for example, paralyze immunity, dizziness immunity, or even headache immunity. But to have total immunity to all types of poisons in the whole wide universe, his mind just couldn't comprehend. How was that possible? Fuck it, there is only one way to find out. He clicked on his spatial card inventory, then tapped on the double-headed viper poison gland that he bought before to test the limit of his poison resistance. He assumed that he would unlock it if he merged with the Anomamba bloodline. Because it was common knowledge that the first passive ability was almost always a resistance, immunity, or a defensive passive, rarely someone would unlock an offensive one from the passive pool at the very start. But now he planned to test the total immunity claim by using the famous viper poison gland that could instantly kill a commoner with a single touch or a whiff. Felix did not drink the gland or bath in it. He simply brought a bucket from the bathroom and popped a tiny hole on the gland's skin, pouring the content slowly in the bucket. After doing so, he retrieved the gland to his spatial card, not daring to throw it in the trash, lest it kills a servant by accidentally touching it. Felix stared at the purplish poison in the bucket with an eager expression. There was not a hint of nervousness or fear in his eyes. After all, he spent the majority of his past life playing with all types of poisons and toxic objects. So without hesitation, he submerged his hand in the bucket for a couple of seconds. Yet he felt absolutely nothing on his skin, just like his hand was in a bucket filled with warm water and not deadly poison. Thrilled, his lips couldn't help but spread wider and wider until it created a creepy grin on his face. Hee, for me to feel warmness instead of pain while touching this deadly poison, it only means that I truly obtained immunity, Felix murmured lightly while lifting his hand from the bucket slowly after the successful test. But he kept it above the bucket to drip from the poison, as he didn't want his carpet to have some drops on it. The last thing he wanted was for his room to have a deadly poison smell. After a while, he cleaned his hand thoroughly with his shirt, then lifted the bucket in front of his mouth and drank a mouthful, unworried about the consequences. F***me. How can poison be this delicious? He cleaned his mouth with the same shirt while burping in enjoyment. Did this passive mess with my tasting buds? He wondered in bewilderment after not expecting it to taste that good. He knew that drinking poison wouldn't harm him, but merely give him stomachache in a worse scenario. However, to actually taste like a cold cola during summer, was truly a surprise for him. After successfully testing his new immunity, he retrieved the bucket and the shirt within his spatial card, not leaving anything in the room that had any relation to poison. Just this passive alone made all my efforts and coins that I wasted worth it, not to mention having extra passive, he said with a heartful laugh after seeing the pleasant returns of chasing after this unknown demanding bloodline path. This only made his resolve to continue threading on it more firm. It's time to test the super strength passive. Hopefully, I obtained a good boost. He lay on the bed with a smile and requested the Queen to log him in. Chapter 72, Testing the Passive Abilities. Chapter 72, Testing the Passive Abilities. He decided to test his ability in the UVR, and not do it in the family gym, since he knew that the equipment wouldn't be able to handle his newly enhanced strength or provide an accurate measurement. However, in the UVR there was a building called the Ability Measurement Center, specifically made to test the bloodliner's abilities. It didn't matter how unique or strong the ability was, the center could definitely provide necessary help to obtain a precise measurement of it. Felix was inside the building, standing on a large floor packed with all types of humans waiting for their turn to enter the measurement rooms, in order to test whatever ability in their possession. Felix didn't want to wait hours until his turn arrives, so he paid the VIP fees and went upstairs to use the best rooms in the center. After paying a hefty fine, he took the elevator and entered the room that was designated for him. Immediately after stepping inside, an AI monotonous voice resounded clearly in the room. "Dear sir, what types of abilities you want to test, physical, elemental, or mental?" "Physical please," he answered. "As you wish, sir." The moment the AI finished speaking, the entire room morphed into a wide room with a massive area to move in freely. Then, all sorts of testing and precise measuring machines were erected all around the place. Some measured the weight, strength, power, firmness, agility, endurance, and more. While others measured sharpness, penetration, and destruction caused by either a morphing passive ability that could turn an arm in a cleaver, or a hand morphed into a hammer, and more of such physical offensive abilities. After all, just because an element was needed to merge with a bloodline, it didn't mean that a bloodliner wouldn't unlock the physical abilities of the beast he used. Everything was on the table when it came to picking abilities from the massive abilities pool. Felix did not bother looking at the majority of those machines. He simply walked towards the punching measurement machine and took a deep breath, then punched with all of his strength, holding absolutely nothing. The machine did not budge or make loud noises, it merely did its job silently and calculated the punch's force. Felix lifted his head and glanced at the final calculation that showcased a whopping 2100 BF. How can this be real? He exclaimed in disbelief, not daring to believe that he broke through the 2K mark from just one passive. After all, 2100 BF meant he had the same physical strength as a second-stage bloodliner. This was the measurement unit used in the UVR for the human bloodline system. BF meant bloodline force, while each 1000 BF signified one replacement stage. So for Felix to have a whopping 2100 BF before even reaching the lesser purity, it made him a beast wearing human skin. In his current integration level, he's supposed to have only 150 BF. If he told anyone that he actually received a 1950 BF boost from super strength passive, they would probably roll their eyes in his direction, totally ignoring his bullshit. 1950 BF. What a joke. The largest ever recorded super strength passive boost was merely 900 BF. That was even from a legendary tier 7 bloodline. Felix knew so as well, thus he kept clutching his fist, then releasing it over and over again, not daring to believe that his pale thin hand was holding such a fearsome force that could slap a commoner to death. After a few moments, he got his shit together and decided to continue his testing. He did a standard 3 punches using only 50% of his power, yet the final result was 3 different calculations. Felix sighed after seeing this, as he knew that his control was quite bad and needed to be worked upon, otherwise, he would keep wasting his energy while throwing punches imprecisely like a monkey. Even worse, harm the people who were close to him if he lacked control for a split second. Commoners and bloodliners never hang around much in real life due to this. After finishing his punching test, he decided to measure his leg force, as well as his defense. He walked towards a machine that had 5 kicking pads installed on it, each with a specific height to test any leg techniques he wanted. But Felix focused only on the middle pad, totally ignoring the others, as he absolutely had no idea how to fight in melee form using martial techniques. His style of fighting was a more elemental range-based than physical melee-based. That's why, he was not excited much after finding out that he obtained a physical type passive before, but that's all changed after seeing the gigantic boost he received, which could overwhelm anyone by pure brutal strength without relying on techniques. Felix kicked pad using all of his force, then retreated back, waiting for the results to appear. A few seconds later, a staggering 2800 BF was shown on the screen. Not bad. Satisfied, he nodded his head with a content smile on his face. He wasn't surprised by the number, as he knew that a full-blown kick was always stronger than a punch. However, punches were roughly 6 times stronger when one had a proper technique in punching. In a nutshell, punch was better than kicks in a fight, but kicks were much more powerful in terms of power, thus balancing their advantages and disadvantages. Felix did not linger more in front of the machine, but directly walked towards the defensive platform, that had all kind of ways to test a bloodliner defense and resistances. Felix did not try them all but chose only 4 machines. One for skin defense against heavy attacks, such as punches, legs, and flat weapons. Second, for skin defense against sharp weapons or abilities. Third, for mental defenses against mental type abilities, such as mind control. Lastly, one used for poison resistance testing. Felix chose the last machine merely to see his body reaction against different types of poisons, and not to see if he had total immunity, since the Viper gland was enough for him to make that decision, based on his long experience dealing with poison and toxins. After an hour or so, he finished testing all of them and realized that his defenses increased immensely, as now he could resist a full-blown attack of a bloodliner in the purification realm just by his physical defenses. However, for the first stage and second stage bloodliners, he had to be careful against them, since one sneaky attack on his vitals could actually heavily wound him. Those were just physically based attacks. As for defenses against mental type abilities, Felix was absolutely naked before them. The passive didn't cover for his mental strength as well, that was a whole other passive. Meanwhile, the poison immunity turned to be just like he expected, as not a single poison inducement managed to affect him. The only difference he found was that each poison had a different flavor, some tasted like orange juice, some like barbecue sauce. Hell, he even began to worry about how he was going to identify if he got poisoned or not by someone when everything tasted so delicious. After this round of testing, Felix decided to return back to the punching machine and start training controlling his strength before he gets kicked out of the room. He didn't pay for VIP treatment, just not take advantage of it. He logged out from the UVR satisfied by the whole experience and the passive abilities that he unlocked, which would definitely make him bully low elo scrubs within the Supremacy game. Chapter 73, one day before the movie release. Chapter 73, one day before the movie release. Time quickly passed as the day of the movie release was fast approaching. Felix got contacted by the studio exactly 8 days before the movie official release to sign on the contract. Of course, there was some push and pull by him and the studio lawyer over the contract condition and details, but Felix never reduced his 39% share offer no matter what the lawyer said or threatened. He was this headstrong about it because he already received news from a staff he bribed heavily, that the investors who got interested in competing with him pulled out, after realizing that he was merely an amateur investor without reputation. So they retreated, not daring to take the risk with him anymore, especially after being mailed secretly by someone about some scandals during the filming. Felix was of course the one who did this, to turn them off even more about taking a bite from his pie. He was never worried about them releasing those scandals to defame the movie because there was no concrete evidence about those scandals, and fans only believed in hard proofs and not rumors in the UVR, the place where scams and lies were running rampage everywhere. Thus, Felix managed to sign the contract successfully without losing his shares, and he had to reluctantly hand over the 300 million SC to the studio, so it could used fully to market and advertise Human Melodies for an entire week widely in Alexander's Kingdom UVR territory. One day before the movie release, Felix was currently roaming again the resources market for high-grade stones after devouring all the batches that he bought. But sadly, every shop he knocked on and asked about them, he was sent away with a head shake, entailing that the stock was empty. Felix was not the only one who wanted those stones, but every other third stage or above bloodliner needed them to recover their energy, as the capacity of their tank gets larger after their bodies get enhanced in each replacement. Hence, low and medium grade stones had absolutely no effect on them or were too cumbersome to absorb. "I guess I sucked the city completely dry from those stones," he sighed in dejection, as he left the shop with the slumped shoulders. Suddenly a loud feminine advertisement was played above his head in a large screen that was placed on a building. "Human Melodies will be available live in each cinema tomorrow at 8 p.m. Don't miss this chance to be the first to watch the newest form of filming and acting combined to create a unique piece of art." After the message was played for probably the 1,000th times, it was accompanied by a well-made trailer of the movie. Felix lifted his head in anguish, as every time he saw it or heard it he felt like his money was thrown at the faces of the street walkers to be simply ignored. Just like now, where no one gave a crap about the movie or its content. Maybe there might be some individuals curious enough to listen to it, but still, the majority only minded their own business and kept on walking. Felix's slumped shoulders almost touched the ground after getting smacked by the reality that his 300 million had just been completely milked dry from every coin in it. "I hope things will go as planned tomorrow, and everyone loves the movie like before, otherwise, I am royally f***ed." Felix was not bullshitting by saying this, as he was truly almost broke after using more than 30 million to secure whatever high stones he found in the Alexander Kingdom cities, leaving him only with 111 million, after selling the filtered Tier 5 bloodline. But that was soon used to buy another Tier 5 bloodline from Luby to be used for the fourth integration. Unfortunately, this time he came empty-handed without getting a single drop of the Hormone-Gondra bloodline, thus, ending up wasting 33 million for nothing. Now he currently owned only 78 million, which was not a lot, considering that Tier 5 bloodline had a price range of 110 to 400 million. This price wasn't even including the legendary rank, as it had its own different incalculable value. As for the high-grade stones, he already brought drought in the Alexander kingdom by himself, after buying more than 4,000 stones from all of the stores and public auctions, leaving every third-stage bloodliner dissatisfied. Sigh, I truly do not want to buy from other kingdoms and empires, but what other solution do I have? Felix logged out disheartened after being cornered to only having one option, and that was to shop from far places. In the earlier days of the UVR, where it was open for everyone to go wherever they please, this was merely a simple thing to do. But after the arrival of the greedy humans, and turning everything upside down by their vicious monetization plans, shopping from another territory became an impossibility with all the heavy tariffs one must pay for the customs enforcers, to have a product reach his place. A small delivery that would cost normally only 200,000 SC, would have 20% of its price as tax, and for Felix, who planned to buy a shitload of stones, the weight of the delivery would also be calculated, adding extra taxes above the basic tax. This made the entire delivery at least double its price by the time it reached Felix. This was why he always avoided buying outside of Alexander Kingdom, but now he had no other choice except to do so, or else, he could just relocate his residence to another kingdom to remove those taxes. Felix stood up from the bed and went to take a shower, since there would be a meeting upstairs to inform the juniors on their current weekly results. 10 minutes later, he arrived on the 35th floor and saw that everyone was already waiting there. After seeing that Felix finally arrived, Abraham started the meeting with his palm striking the podium out loud. "Henry, you little shit, how dare you waste a precious integration attempt by merely using 2% to merge with?" he scolded. "Do you think we shit potions for you to waste like that?" Before Henry could retort, he got smacked in his neck by his father. "You told me you used 6% when I was with you. How dare you lie to me in my face?" His father grabbed him by the collar and shoved him in the wall with bloodshot eyes. Felix stared at the scene while yawning in boredom. He was already used to such scenes, as the same happened in the majority of the past meetings. Juniors lying about their used percentages after realizing that the pain would come in stronger waves for each added percentage. Felix did not pay attention to those cousins who would get stuck forever in the purification stage, but focused on Noah, who almost reached 15%, and Olivia, who was slowly catching up. As for Kenny, he was still at 7%, due to his average 51% affinity, making his cool-down period quite long. After a while, the farce finally concluded after the parents took away Henry to accept his punishment. Abraham did not scold anyone again, but instead praised them warmly. "Good job, children, you are slowly improving yourselves. If you kept going like this, reaching lesser purity will be piece of cake." His vision focused on Olivia and Noah and continued with encouragement, especially those two who will definitely reach 15% and be the first to unlock a passive ability during their 4th integration. He started clapping for them, and everyone followed after. Every week the junior with the best results receive applause as a form of encouragement, so it became a habit to follow clapping without being told so. Noah accepted their applause expressionlessly as always, while Olivia dug her head downward with flushed cheeks. Meanwhile, Felix, who was dozing off, was awakened by the loud clapping in irritation. Part 7 of the series ends here. If you enjoyed it, please give us a like and subscribe so we can be motivated to make even better videos in the future.